Alright, let's look at 7C. Describe the reform movements. Specifically, and here's the key word here, specifically, which ones did they want us to describe? Temperance movement, the abolition movement or abolitionism, and public school movement or common school movement. Here our focus is on reform movements, and we have three different areas: temperance movement, abolition movement, public school movement. Social and political interactions are a theme in all three of these. Let's talk about what reform is. What does the word reform mean? Definition is to change, or to improve. Reform movements organized attempts to improve problems in society. The characteristics are to improve, to modify, to change, to alter, to make more democratic. Those are some characteristics. Some examples are Horace Mann's public education reform report: public schools to have tax-funded schools, raise teacher pay, compulsory education, make kids come to school, extend the school year. Non-examples are having slave masters continue what's been going on, keeping the status quo, what's been happening that's not working, keeping that, or keeping things the way they are. Alright, so the temperance movement was a movement led mostly by Christian women to get men and anyone really to stop drinking alcohol. They thought alcohol was evil. Men would lose their paychecks, buying them alcohol at saloons, and come home broke, and come home drunk, beating up their wives and mistreating their children. And a lot of women in the temperance movement wanted to put an end to this. And some laws were made by the mid-19th century, 1850s, but not a national law. And eventually, in our study, we're going to talk about the prohibition movement of the 1920s, and we're going to turn back and talk about this temperance movement and how it influenced it. But at this time, these women have this movement to end the consumption of alcoholic beverages. The other movement, public schools, was also called the common school movement. Horace Mann was the leader in this area, and Horace Mann pushed for tax-funded public schools. In other words, that children get to go to school without paying a tuition that's paid for through taxes. To raise teacher pay and have them become more professional, and receive more training, and then extend the school year, and then make the kids come to school. Compulsory education's laws that said kids had to go to school up to a certain age, and that's Horace Mann. The definition of the next movement, abolitionist movement, or abolition or abolitionism. The definition of an abolitionist is a person who wishes to put an end to or eliminate slavery, like immediately. To stop slavery is an abomination, it's wrong. Abolitionist movement was an organized effort by a group of people who were called abolitionists to end slavery. Characteristics: to stop slavery, to put an end to slavery, to do away with slavery altogether, eliminate slavery, get rid of slavery. Some examples are William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass. William Lloyd Garrison was a white abolitionist leader of and a publisher of a abolitionist newspaper that was centered on ending slavery. It's called The Liberator. And Frederick Douglass was a former slave who escaped out of slavery, and his newspaper, or he published the North Star. And non-examples were to enslave, to yoke, to bind, to keep slavery going. So this is a movement to end slavery altogether. And let's take a look at these two guys, these abolitionists, real quick. Frederick Douglass was a former slave who escaped in the Underground Railroad. He becomes a famous orator, very educated, very passionate, strong abolitionist, and he owns his own newspaper called the North Star. And I tell my kids to remember this, that on the Underground Railroad, that's how a lot of slaves knew how to go north, is to look for the North Star, shining star up in the sky. And that's what he called his publication, his newspaper, the North Star. Abolitionist cause, trying to get slavery ended. And this is Frederick Douglass here. Okay. A white abolitionist, his name was William Lloyd Garrison. This is William Lloyd Garrison here. He published a an abolitionist newspaper to end slavery called the Liberator, and to liberate means to free. So the Liberator's primary cause was to end slavery. So William Lloyd Garrison was also an abolitionist that wanted to end slavery, and that he was involved in this movement. Two women, Sarah and Angelina Grimke, were sisters, were very prominent in this movement. Their parents lived in the South on a plantation where they grew up, and from a very early age they became anti-slavery. And when they got older, they moved out, and became their own, and they become abolitionists and spoke out against slavery and what they saw growing up on the plantation. And these women, a lot of women are going to be involved in the abolitionist movement, in the temperance movement, in the education movement. Women are going to be very active in reform and change. Sarah Grimke wrote this. She says, "I ask no favor from my sex. I surrender not our claim to equality. All I ask of our brethren is that they will take their feet off our necks." So Angelina Grimke was a very powerful spokesperson for equality for women. I try to use this visual here to get you guys to understand, my students to understand the differences between the three, and to give you a graphic organizer to show you which one's which. Of course, you should know what this one is, it should be obvious. But if we fill those in, we get that this abolitionist movement to end slavery in the United States. So here's a free slave, picture of a free slave. That'll help you out, make a visual cue there, abolition to end slavery. And here's no alcohol, there's a lager and some wine there. Temperance movement, to stop the consumption of alcohol. I tried, one of the things we say in class is that when men get drunk, they get a temper, they get mad and their temper flares. So temperance is when you don't drink alcohol, you won't lose your temper. I don't know if that helps, but hey, roll with it if it does. All right. Common school movement, or the public school system or movement, is called for compulsory laws for kids to go to school, teacher training and pay, and that the school and all this will be paid for and financed through taxes, and public education would be free for the children. So these are three reform movements we were supposed to learn. Did we meet our standard? Describe the reform movement, specifically temperance, abolitionism, and public school. I think we have. Look back over this if you like. I hope it helps you. Good luck on the test.